thing. Just like that, we are off. My name's Casey. This is the Monday 5:30 Mindfulness Meditation half hour. Great to see you all, as always. There's a term that I wanted to discuss, and it's a term that I brought up at an earlier meeting, I think maybe last week at one of these meetups, or last month rather. And it was the idea of psychological flexibility. And when I took a mindfulness course, that was one of the terms that he used. He said that mindfulness increases our psychological flexibility. And what does it mean to be flexible? And not necessarily from a literal level, although I do like that kind of, we could play on the words there because all of us have practiced yoga, and yoga does increase your flexibility on a physical level as well. But when we say that someone's schedule is flexible, or you go, what do you want to do today? And you go, I don't know, I'm flexible. What does that mean? It means that you're open to anything, really. Like, let's see what happens. I'm open, I'm flexible. And to have psychological flexibility, I think, is such an amazing tool to have, because the mind is inherently very rigid, and it likes to stick to what it conceives to be the facts, which fortunately are erroneous 99.999% of the time. Your mind has a horrible track record of what it thinks is going to happen, or how it perceives things that have happened previously, or even interpreting the present moment where you are right now. And we often take the mind so seriously that it says, this is how things were, and that's fixed. This is how things are, and that's fixed. This is how things are going to be, and that's fixed. It's very rigid. And so for us to have psychological flexibility, that can be an excellent way to approach whatever's going on. Because I thought, well, is there such thing as emotional flexibility? Or is there such thing as, like, are there different kinds of flexibility? And I thought, well, not really, because emotions are just emotions. You perceive all of these things, the experience, through your mind. The Buddha says the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Everything goes through the mind, and that determines our overall experience. And so emotional flexibility, everything is psychological, because that's how we perceive things, and that's how we interpret and ultimately experience things through that lens of our mind. However, mindfulness helps for us to gain more psychological flexibility. And there's many different ways to talk about the space between stimulus and response, which I've spoken about many times. Meditation is growing the space between stimulus and response, which is whatever your present moment experience is giving you, and how you choose to interpret and react to that. And I think last week I said, how do you want to experience your experience? Because there's two experiences. The first one is the one that you can't control. That's whatever the present moment is giving you. The second one can be interpreted, and through mindfulness, through meditation, through the benefits of psychological flexibility, you can decide how you want to deal with that, because the space between the stimulus and response has grown. That space is mindfulness. That's the space that we occupy when we meditate, and then we can take that with us. Oftentimes, here's a stimulus and the response is right there. Yes. And so we don't really give ourselves time to think, well, how do I want to go about this? Can I be a little bit more flexible with how I want to approach this? For instance, if you stub your toe, the first thing that you're going to do, chances are you're going to tense up, and you're going to grit your teeth, and you're going to tense all the muscles in your face. You're going to say a few words that you wouldn't want to be on the internet, on a video. And it's going to be a lot of resistance to the pain. However, if you stub your toe, and the first thing you do is relax and start to deepen your breath and bring your awareness to your toe, and allow that pain to kind of make its way through you, and you're present for that entire experience of pain, those are two very different ways to deal with the same experience, which is stubbing the toe. Because we have that space of stimulus and response which we can get, that comes with practice. Like, not everyone's just going to stub their toe and immediately be a Zen master. One of the reasons that we practice this stuff is because it's actually very challenging to do. And so much of this is automatic. Our mind is very rigid. And oftentimes what Eckhart Tolle calls the mind identification, where we identify so much with our mind that we think this is reflective of the reality around us, which is just not true, actually. The mind is one of many ways to see the world. But psychological flexibility, that is a term that I really can appreciate, because you sit down and you think, okay, I'm open to anything. Let's just be open to anything for the next 10, 20 minutes. Let's just see what happens. Be flexible with it. And emotions come and emotions go. Thoughts come and go. And you can notice what thoughts pull you, what emotions kind of push you. And you're just there for the experience. In other words, you're a participant and not a victim. Because when we get emotional, oftentimes we feel like we are at the mercy of that emotion. It's very human to feel this way. But that is one of many responses that we can have to an emotional experience. And so when we get emotional, that's a stimulus. And if we practice sitting down and relaxing and allowing whatever comes up to come up and being present as it leaves, that practice is what grows the space between stimulus and response. The first experience, which we can't control, to the second experience, which we actually have a lot of control over. And we can grow that control as well. That awareness. The Buddha talks about two arrows. The first arrow, if it hits you, it's going to hurt. Second arrow, if it hits you in the same spot, it's going to hurt a lot more. The first arrow is your first experience, your circumstances, whatever's coming up. The second experience, or the second arrow, is how you choose to deal with it. And oftentimes we refer to the second arrow as suffering. That arrow does not need to come, because we start to realize that suffering is just one of many possible ways to deal with whatever's going on. Suffering is just one of many options that we have, because we're open to anything. We're flexible. We've increased that psychological flexibility. And it is so important that we continue to meditate and practice when things are boring, when there's really nothing going on, when things are relatively stable, when there's really not a lot to take in. You're just relaxing and you're just breathing, and it could be kind of boring. John Kabat-Zinn, I was reading one of his books, and he says, if you ever get bored breathing, try this breathing technique. Take your thumb and your first finger and clamp your nostrils really tight, and then seal your lips as tight as you can as well. And then hold that until breathing becomes interesting again. And I was laughing so hard because I thought he was going to say like one nostril breathing, like try this technique, but it's like, no, just hold your breath until breathing becomes interesting again. And so coming back to the breath, and just being with yourself when there's not a lot of strong emotions, or when there's not particular thoughts that are, when the experience is pretty mellow, that's actually very important. Because if you wait until things are falling apart to sit down and go, okay, well, I better start meditating now, the work will not have been done. The space would not have been grown between stimulus and response. Your practice will probably not be strong enough to give yourself the options or the psychological flexibility to deal with these things in a healthier and more conscious way. And we could liken it to like the river. There's parts of a river where it's really rough and the water is going very fast. And if you want to learn how to swim and make your way through the river and navigate the river, you don't want to jump into the most intense part immediately, having never learned how to swim or never been in the river before. You want to wade in and relax and maybe float around a little bit and kind of get a feel for what's going on here. And that is, in essence, the meditation practice from the easier days where we think, this is, pretty nice, nothing's really going on, to the other days where we're like, man, this is the last thing that I want to do is sit down and deal with these emotions or feel this, and that may be the initial response. However, with that practice, it can become a luxury to sit down and allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, because we tune in to what we're feeling, what we're thinking, where we may be feeling it, how we may be feeling it in our body. And that is the most effective way to process through an emotion. And so if you're feeling a particular way, especially with these more challenging and difficult emotions that we all have from time to time, the most effective way to process through and work through that emotion, the only way out is through, you could say. And when we sit down to meditate and just allow whatever happens to happen, to be flexible, to be open to whatever, to allow ourselves to interpret the experience in all kinds of ways or no way at all. We don't need to interpret anything when we meditate. And that's cool because oftentimes we're just always interpreting, and the mind applies meaning to all things, regardless of actual significance. That's its job. But we don't need to buy into that narrative. We don't need to take the mind at face value or think that, oh, that's true. What I'm thinking right now is true. I could say, well, that's one of many ways to deal with this thought that I'm having. And that's one of many ways that I can work through this emotion that I'm having. And that flexibility becomes a really powerful tool for us because we've grown that space between stimulus and response. And then suddenly we have a lot more control over things that at first were controlling us. But the way that we go through that is to allow everything to happen. We relax, which can sometimes, and in theory, sound pretty easy. But if you meditated for a little while, you know that the experience can definitely vary from easy to meh to get me out of here. But all that being said, the term of psychological flexibility can also extend to a yoga practice because we're all familiar with yoga practices. We've all established that. And in yoga, we practice stretching and our body becomes more flexible over time. Last week, I think it was last week, I was talking about how the body adapts to different musical instruments. The fingers on my left hand are longer than the fingers on my right because I played guitar for 25 years. Trumpet players build up muscles in their lips that would not exist unless you play trumpet. And if they stop playing trumpet, those muscles disappear. Your body adapts to whatever you do. The mind is everything what you think you become. Where you put your focus, where you put your energy, and your awareness will determine everything in a sense. It's all cumulative. And when we start to practice yoga, at first we may be really stiff, and then we start to get flexible when we practice in class. And then suddenly we're just more flexible all the time, actually, because your body has acclimated to the practice to where you reach down to pick something up and you're like, wow, I couldn't really do that before I started practicing yoga. Off of your mat, you still retain those benefits of that yoga practice. And it's the same with any practice, really, but it's certainly the same with meditation, where if we can sit down and notice that we have an itch and we mindfully choose not to scratch it, if we can do it with an itch, then we can do it with a thought, where a thought comes up and we go, I don't really need to do anything about that. And if we can do it with a thought, we can start to practice with our emotions to where no matter how strong the emotion is, we understand what's happening there. And because we have that psychological flexibility, because we've grown the space between stimulus and response, we get to decide how we want to deal with the present moment, how we want to experience the experience. First experience we can't control. Second experience, we can. We can control how we take that in, how we perceive, how we interpret, and ultimately how we experience it. So I invite you today, think of any of that or none of it, and find a comfortable seated position. We'll get started. Long spine, shoulders relaxed, eyes closed. Take a few deep breaths just as you are, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Whenever you're ready, seal your lips. Continue breathing in and out through your nose. As you stay with your breath and as you stay deepening in this mindful stillness, make it a point to be actively open to whatever the present moment is giving you: physical sensations, emotions, thoughts. See if you can actively stay open to these things. And if you find yourself closing off or having adverse or even positive reactions to a particular stimuli, come back to your breath and stay open, just watching what happens, observing with interest and not taking anything personally, being flexible with whatever comes up. As you continue to stay with your breath in the present moment, allow yourself to dive deeper into the richness of this experience that you're having, whatever it is. Becoming even more present and observant of your thoughts, your body, your emotions. Being an active participant in this almost galactical experience, so many things going on. And reminding yourself that whatever your experience is, you don't have to do anything about it. Reacting to it is one of many, many possible approaches. Take 3 deep breaths. Gently open your eyes. I was reading a book on meditation and mindfulness, and in the book it said, a tense mind cannot exist in a relaxed body. And I personally don't find that to be true, just because I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. And there are times where I've done 2 or even 3 yoga classes in a row, and my body's very relaxed, but my mind is still tense. I would think that it would be more accurate to put it the other way, which is a tense body cannot exist with a relaxed mind. Because even if your body is tense, even if you're experiencing strong emotions or strong pain or difficult thoughts, if you're still relaxed in your mind, psychologically flexible, then really nothing can phase you in the same way, because we're dealing with it in a conscious and healthy way. And that's the power of this practice. I want to thank you for sharing your practice with me today. My name is Casey. See you soon.